Welcome to this class. Today we would be talking about the 25 questions for the Psychology paper 2 June 2015 NET examination. Now most of the questions here were concept based. So let's start with the very first question in this series. The first question talks about people who learn more and more list of words on successive days have more and more difficulty learning each new list next day. That means because of the prior knowledge they are having problem in learning or difficulty in learning the new list of names. So that is due to the phenomena of interference. So this can be explained by the concept of interference. The next reason says people have limited capacity to learn verbal material. Now that's again a correct statement, but I cannot say because I have a limited capacity to learn, I am having difficulty in learning every new thing, because that is due to interference, and that is due to another concept which is known as the limited capacity model. This model was given by Baddeley, Chandler and Sweller. So these three people try to explain that our brain has limited capacity for both verbal responses and auditory and visual responses. So I have say a capacity of X for visual response and capacity of Y for auditory response. So beyond that, it would be difficult for me to remember things. There was another model which was known as the dual capacity model, and this model states that person has separate sense for remembering the visual input as well as the auditory input. So here we can say this is explained by the limited capacity model, this is explained by the concept of interference. Both of the statements are correct, but both do not explain one another. So 2 is the correct choice here. Next question is again an assertion reason question. Now let's understand what is a postsynaptic potential and how does that happen. So when we talk about synapse, so synapse is the junction point for the neuron. So this is one neuron and this is say another neuron. So this neuron transmits information to the next neuron, and this is where you have the postsynaptic information that goes on. Now postsynaptic potential can be of two types. It can be excitatory in nature. It can be inhibitory in nature. Excitatory means the likelihood of the event or the likelihood of the potential is to increase, and under inhibitory it would decrease. So the question says a synapse does not necessarily result into an action potential in postsynaptic neuron. That's correct. Because it's not necessary that this synapse would lead to an action in a postsynaptic neuron, because there can be inhibition, and because of the inhibition there could be decline. So synapse produces inhibitory postsynaptic potential also in the postsynaptic neuron. That's again correct. So assertion and reason both are correct, and reason explains the assertion. So I can say A is correct. Choice first is correct. Now if I look at this diagram, I can see the first graph shows the excitatory potential and the second shows the inhibitory potential. The point where there is an excitatory potential, there is increase in the response, and the point where there is an inhibitory potential shows a decline or restriction in the response. So the correct answer, as I explained before, would be both assertion and reason are correct, and reason is the correct explanation for the assertion. The next question, which of the following is not the way we acquire concepts? Now most of the the answer is given in the question itself. The question says how we acquire concepts. That means we can directly say that concepts are acquired in nature. Now since they are acquired, they can be acquired either naturally, through learning, or by definition, but they cannot be innate. Innate means inborn, or the things that you know by birth. And the innate responses are usually known as instincts. Okay, so 3 is incorrect. 1, 2 and 4 would be the correct reasons how we acquire concepts. We can either acquire them naturally, we can learn something and acquire a concept, and we can acquire a concept by definition. If I say the apple falls down due to gravity, okay, so I can understand the concept of gravitation by definition and I can apply it, and that is how we learn a concept by definition. The next question is a direct question. You have been asked about the definition of the terms given on the left hand side or in the list 1. So creativity is developing or innovation or novelty or originality in an idea. So the only choice that matches originality is first. The cognitive process that employs proportionate novelty to originality would be the answer for creativity. Now working backward means I have a problem, okay, I have a goal in front of me that I want to clear this examination. Now when I have a final goal with me, to clear that examination I will do all the required things. So what I am doing is I am setting a goal, and from that goal I am going backwards and working to prepare for that examination. So working backwards explains a problem solving technique that identifies the final goals and the steps in the reverse order from the goal. So D, the correct match would be 4. Now what is functional fixedness? Functional fixedness means some people have problem in seeing an alternative. So for any object or something, they have a common object, say any object. I have my mindset that this would be the object, how it would look. So that's a kind of functional fixedness. And finally is backtracking. So backtracking is again you are trying to keep track of the problem by taking into account the assumptions. Okay, so the correct answer here would be this. So where you are trying to make assumptions and then you are tracking them back, whether the assumptions that you have considered were correct or not, and whether you can work on those assumptions or not. So the correct order would be 2, 3, 1 and 4. So 2, 3, 1 and 4, this would be the correct answer. Next question, the visual cliff experiment was an experiment that was demonstrated on toddlers. This is an experiment that was used to understand the concept of depth perception among children specifically. The aim was the child was put on a glass surface and then there was a patterned or structured surface next to it. So the child had a feeling that as soon as he will move out, he would topple down. But in reality that does not happen. So that was done to demonstrate the concept of depth perception among infants. So this is the correct choice. We would be covering the complete visual cliff experiment in a separate class when we will be talking about perception. The next question talks about the two fundamental traits, the source and the surface traits. Now what are these? Surface traits are common collection of traits, and we try to understand the intercorrelation between the elements that form the surface trait. Okay. Under source traits we try to find the underlying cause or the underlying factors that control the surface traits. So both of these are employed as a method for factor analysis, but these two statements explain both the terms independently. Both of them are correct, but it does not explain, the reason does not explain the assertion. So I can say both assertion and reason are true, but reason is not the correct explanation for assertion. Now here we are trying to understand the action potential. So if I draw a curve, I say this is say minus 70 millivolt. So this is the resting potential stage. Then there is a stage of depolarization, complete depolarization, and then there is repolarization, hyperpolarization back to resting potential. So this is depolarization, this is repolarization, this is hyperpolarization, and this is again the polarized state or the resting potential. So the resting potential or the polarized state is minus 70 So this is the graph that I have drawn. Now as we can see, complete depolarization occurs at around plus 35. So here the closest match is plus 45 millivolts. So that would be the answer for complete depolarization. The process of depolarization starts at minus 70. So whatever number is between minus 70 to plus 45 would fall under depolarization. So here minus 65 millivolts would be the depolarized state. And finally, hyperpolarization is also known as positive after potential, and this is further negative. So you can say minus 75 or far below it. So minus 72 would be the stage of hyperpolarization. So this would be the correct match. You can also understand this with this diagram, as I had already drawn that you have an action potential curve. This is the resting potential. It starts to depolarize. As it starts to depolarize at around 40s, you have the complete depolarization that occurs. Finally it repolarizes, and then you have the phase of hyperpolarization here, which is further negative. So minus 75, minus 80 would be the range of hyperpolarization, and finally it again achieves the resting state, that is minus 70 millivolts. Next question. In problem solving process, people generally evolve and select the optimal solution for a problem. So I have a problem situation. I am trying to find, say, 5 number of solutions, S1, S2, S3 and S4 and S5. Out of these I pick out an optimum solution for the problem, okay, and that optimum solution for the problem would help me solve this problem. So in problem solving, people generally select the optimal solution, that is correct. A number of solutions are identified, and from those solutions that you are identifying, you are choosing a optimum solution. So both assertion and reason are correct, and reason is a correct explanation for the assertion. So first would be the correct answer here. Next question. Now this question, it's important to read the question carefully, because a small mistake or a spelling mistake can make the answer incorrect rather. The question says, sometimes old information facilitates the learning of new information. That means my prior knowledge is helping me out in some new knowledge, and that means what is happening is a positive transfer of knowledge. We also call it transfer effect or positive transfer. However, if the question was old information disrupts the learning of new information, it would be an interference, and it would be a kind of proactive interference. So it's very important to read the question carefully, because most of the students, what they did was, old information disrupts the new information. That is the basic statement that we learn in forgetting. So just by remembering that, okay, the answer would be proactive interference. But this question has been twisted specifically for the students who have done a rote learning and who are prone to do silly mistakes. The next question, this question is based on perception and the general concept of perception. When we talk about perception, we do not perceive things in absolute terms. We perceive things relative to something. So if I say that you are standing, say, 5 feet away from me and you are looking at me, you would say that I am nearly 3/4 way of the complete picture that you can see in, or halfway of the picture that you can see in. Even if you move, say, 10 steps backward or 10 steps forward, you will have the same perception. That means in this question also, the absolute height of the person when it is being perceived will not change, because it is relative to the other objects or the surrounding environment. So in this question, it says there is a 6-foot man. When I am seeing that man from 10 feet distance, if I see that man from 20 feet distance, the image in my retina gets smaller, that's by x by 2, and here it was x. But if I see that man at 5 feet distance, my image in my retina would increase. It would look as bigger to me, but in relative perspective the height of the person would be same because I am judging that person relative to the surrounding elements. Next question. This question is again a tricky question. The question says, who did a first attempt to both theorize and measure intelligence? Now, theorizing the intelligence was first propounded by Galton, that's well known. So, Galton was a person who first theorized intelligence. Galton also measured something, but that was not intelligence, rather he measured senses. And to measure sense, he devised numerous instruments through which he could measure the senses. However, the question asks who measured intelligence first. So, intelligence was first measured by Binet. So, the correct answer here would be who first tried to theorize and measure intelligence. The correct answer would be Binet and not Galton. So, Galton theorized it but could not measure it. Binet both theorized and measured it. The next question is, now Maslow's common theory that we all know is the need for hierarchy. Now this question is not based on Maslow's need for hierarchy, but another concept of Maslow that was known as fear for unknown. This fear for unknown concept given by Maslow was also known as Jonai complex. Under this, he tried to say that gratification of the basic needs always occur in a positive direction, but that is not that is not automatic. We have a lot of fear from our side, but that fear of unknown is something that was explained by Maslow. So he said that we fear our talents, we fear our good sides, and we fear our creativity, and that fear does not allow us to progress automatically in the positive direction. That is what he explained as the Jonai complex or the fear of unknown. So both reason and assertion are true, and assertion is the correct explanation for the reason. Next question. Now this question, there was a similar question in June 2013 examination on psychology, paper 3. Now there the question was a bit different from what has been asked this time. So let's first understand the three types of validity that has been explained in the question. Now, be it either incremental, predictive or concurrent validity, the main thing we need to understand is that it is a measure of correlation between the score and some external criteria or some other criteria. So if I say, let's start with understanding the very basics of concurrent validity. So concurrent validity is measurement between the test and an external criteria, but at the same time. So here we are not doing it at the same time. So concurrent validity cannot be the answer. The next is incremental validity. Incremental validity, I have a very simple example for it. I want to predict my first year college scores. How can I do that? I can do that based on class 12th results, and I can do that also based on the class 12th results and the entrance exam that I have given to get into the college. Now, if I try to explain that just based on my class 12th scores, I can say my class 12th scores explain around 20% of the variance in the first year results, but my class 12th and entrance exam results together explain say 35% of the variance in the first year scores. That means this entrance examination is having an incremental effect, or because of this entrance examination that has been added to this, my aggregate variance has increased, or that this has caused an additional predictive power. If that was the case, I could clearly say this is an example of incremental validity. So incremental validity occurs when there is an extra element that has been added. So here it was one test, here it is two tests, and I can clearly say that increment of this second test has increased my predictive power. So I can say there is an incremental validity. The question that was asked in June 2013 talked about the basics of incremental validity. Now let's understand in this question what has been asked. So in this question, you have a fifth test that is being added to an old established test batteries for 4 tests. So let's say I want to predict my first year college scores. The 4 tests that I have is PET, IIT, SAT and class 12th marks. So these are the first combinations. In the next combination I have PET, IIT, SAT, class 12th, and I have another test that has been added, that is ACT. Now what happens here is, in the first case you have a suitable external criteria, say that's the score in the first year examinations, and 3 tests from the old battery. So I can pick any 3 tests from these 4. Let's say I pick PET, IIT and SAT in this case, and in the other test, the other new battery that has been formed, I pick 4 tests. So if I take the 4 tests that were already in the old battery and they are there in the new battery, I cannot say anything about the 5th test. So I cannot say whether the 5th test has any impact on the significant change in R square or not. So that means I cannot judge anything about the individual tests. So I cannot say what is happening with the 5th test. So both the choices 2 and 4 cannot be correct in this case. Now in this case, I can have any of the combinations. I can either choose all the 4 old tests, or I can add a new test. I can choose a new test that has been added. So let's say I choose the test PET, SAT, class 12 and ACT. Now here there is just PET and SAT that is common in both the cases. So what is happening here is, I can say there is an additional predictive power, and with these 3 tests supposedly the variance comes to be around 20%, and with these 4 the variance comes to be around 25%. I can say definitely there are 2 tests, I don't know which 2 tests, but there are definitely 2 tests which have an additional predictive power, and that additional predictive power is leading to a significant change in the R square. Now R square explains how closely our data is fitted on a regression line. So that can be predicted only by, that can be explained only by the additional predictive power of the new battery. So the correct answer here would be the predictive validity of the new battery. This was a very conceptual question and was a bit tilted from what was asked in June 2013. There was a similar question. The next question here is, this question is again based on some rare concepts that students usually miss out in psychology. The question says, which of the following stages is called period of problem solving behavior? Now let's first understand all the 4 stages. The reflex is the stage that is discussed from birth till 1 month, and this stage is highly focused on, say, crying or sucking behavior or any behavior that is reflexly happening. The next is the primary circular reaction that happens from 1 to 4 months of the age group. This is followed mainly with the motor reflexes that a child does. The next is the secondary circular reaction, usually in the age group of 4 to 8 months. Under this, the child tries to do something out of pleasure. So for example, there is a toy of duck or say some fruit. If the child squeezes that, it makes a sound. So that is, child is discovering it out of pleasure but getting a response or getting something. In the tertiary circular stage, that is usually between 12 months to 18 months, that is 1 year to 1.5 years period, what a child does is tries to solve problems related to that. So for example, initially when the child was in the secondary circular stage, the child was just pressing it and the toy was making a noise. Now in this stage, child will try some other thing like pushing it on floor, trying to press it, and then see whether the noise comes out or the sound comes out or not. So what the child is trying to do here is to apply a problem solving behavior rather than just doing it for pleasure. So the correct answer for problem solving behavior would be tertiary reaction or tertiary circular reaction. Next question. The rate of responding is found to be higher in which kind of conditioning? Now we talk about 4 types of reinforcement. Reinforcement can either be based on interval or ratio. Under interval, it can be of 2 types: fixed interval, variable interval, fixed ratio and variable ratio. Now interval deals with time. So if I know if I am doing an experiment on dog and whatever response he does or not, I would give him a food pellet only after say 5 minutes, that is the fixed interval. After a period of rehearsals or a period of trials, the dog would come to know that I am being given a food pellet only after 5 minutes. That means that there is a fixed interval and that would never be that would never have a very high rate of responding. So the responding rate would never be that motivated or not that high. Similarly, in the case of variable interval, the dog would never be such motivated to respond because he knows that he would get a reinforcement, but the duration is not defined. So the response rate would not be that high, specifically in the starting. But what would happen in the fixed ratio? Fixed ratio, whenever the dog presses 5 times or does some action 4 or 5 times, I am providing the food pellet. So what he would do, he would try to increase the speed of doing that reaction, and that would increase the reinforcement or the rate of responding. Similarly, even if there is a variable ratio, say in a game of lottery or a gambling, where the duration is not known, people will try to put in more and more money, say for example in lottery game, just to get a reinforcement at a quicker pace. So the rate of responding would be higher in case of both fixed ratio and fixed variable, and not in case of fixed interval, because whenever there is a certain time period given, that would never increase the rate of responding at that rate as compared to the fixed ratio or variable ratio. So the correct answer here would be both 3 and 4. Next question. Now this statement talks about few things. Just by one thing we can explain this complete concept. There were 2 terms that were propounded by Freud. First was animus, another was anima. Animus is the male aspect of a female psyche, while anima is the female aspect of male psyche. So if I know these 2 very carefully, I can say C is incorrect here. Masculine archetype in men, so it is masculine and it is men. So masculine archetype in female would be animus. So this should be female. So this is incorrect. So since this is incorrect, I can say A, B and D would be the correct choice. The next question. Now the correct sequence of events for audition. This we would be covering when we would be talking about the structure of internal ear, middle ear and the central auditory system. However, for now I will just try to introduce you I have a diagram here. So you have the cochlear nucleus followed by the superior olivar nucleus, inferior collici, medial geniculate body, and finally the primary auditory cortex. So that would be the correct order. So if I go back, the order would be cochlear nuclei at the first. So you have D in first two choices. So 3 and 4 is straight away gone. And finally it lands to a primary auditory cortex. So A should be the last choice. Now A is the last choice in all. Cochlear is followed by superior, then you have the inferior, then you have the medial. So you have cochlear, superior, inferior, medial, and primary auditory cortex. So that would be the correct sequence. So the correct answer here would be A. So you have cochlear, superior, inferior, medial, and auditory. We would be covering this in detail, the complete auditory pathway, in the subsequent classes. The next question. Now what is perception? There are a lot many questions on perception this time. So perception is not only projecting the world into our brain, but it is forming constructs. Now how can I form constructs? To form construct, I should have sensible pieces of sensations that are disassembled into information bits. Now these information bits are later on reassembled into a functional model. This functional model would give me an idea for perception. This perception would later on help me either in depth perception or perceptual constancies. So that would help my neuromuscular cues from a greater inward turn when the eyes view the near object. So what is this? This is a definition for convergence. And convergence is a kind of depth perception, a binocular depth perception. So you have convergence as a binocular depth perception. So only when I have the sensations that are disassembled into information bits, they are finally assembled into functional model and they turn out into perception, and this perception can explain the depth perception and the perceptual constancies. I can say first three sentences are correct, but I cannot say that perception is mere projecting the world into our brain. It is not a mere projection of the world into our brain, rather than it is aimed at forming constructs, and this is how the constructs are formed. So D is the incorrect choice here. So A, B, C would be the correct option. Next question. Now this is matching the definition of the terms. So some of them we can really pinpoint very fast. So self-presentation. Self-presentation means presenting yourselves in public. So the way one thinks of presenting oneself before public would be self-presentation. So this goes on directly. Self-handicapping means I have an ability to do something, but I don't have that confidence on my ability. So it is when I have a doubt on my ability to perform a task, I say I am self-handicapped. The next is self-schema and self-esteem. Schema means a structure or an organization. So the only choice that matches with organization here is self-schema explains the organization of information about self, that is choice 3. And self-esteem is how you evaluate yourself or how you generalize yourself. So self-esteem is a generalized view, a generalized evaluation of yourself. So this would be the correct match. Next question. The next question is asked about eyewitness testimony and the sources that reduce the accuracy of eyewitness. Now what is eyewitness? Supposedly a person from city goes into a rural area and has a hit and run accident. Hit and run accident happens in a rural area, and that hit and run accident is witnessed by another person who is from the city. So let's make this. This is the urban area. A person with a car goes into the rural area. Here he has a hit and run accident that occurs, and this is witnessed by another person who is from the urban area. Now, when this person is inquired about in front of the police, what would be the first kind of inquiry? For example, the policeman says to this person I believe that this car was going at a very high speed. That's a kind of leading question that the policeman can give. And this leading question might decrease the accuracy of this person's response, and he might believe, yes, because that car was going at a very fast speed, there was a hit and run accident. So that is a leading question. And since police officer suggested this question, this kind of error is known as error was due to suggestibility. Okay. So this is the first error that happens in eyewitness testimony. The person who has witnessed this accident would say, due to the suggestion from the police officer, that yes, this person who was coming from the urban area was driving at a very fast speed, or a reckless driver, and hence this accident occurred. The next is source monitoring error. Source monitoring error says that, for example, this person was taken to police office, and at the police office he was shown a kind of photographs of the people who already had similar cases of hit and run in that village. So after seeing say 5 or 10 photographs repeatedly or after a given period of time, this person might believe that the person who did the hit and run accident was one among these 5. So that is source monitoring error. That is an error caused due to the source that you are providing to the person. The next error here that we understand is the illusion caused due to outgroup homogeneity. Since this person is from the urban area, he would feel all the persons from the rural area in a similar form. So the person who has been hit here, he would say all of them look the same, so they have something similarity in them, and there might be a mistake of this person who was here, and because of that this accident occurred. So since he is an outgroup, he is from urban area and the remaining population is from rural area, and those all people look similar to him, that would be a leading source of error. So the answer here would be suggestibility, source monitoring error, and illusion of outgroup homogeneity. Next question. Now this question is based on the passage. Now the passage, however, talks about the various research methods, the quasi-research, experimental research, and so on. But none of this information would help you in solving the questions that have been asked. This is just a basic information about what kind of questions would be asked in the following section. So the first question that is asked about is understanding the quasi-experimental designs. Now quasi-experimental designs we would be covering under the section on experiments. So we would be talking about the various types of experiment. For now, survey is not a kind of quasi-experiment design, and that you can understand from this slide also, because quasi-experiment designs have been developed. Okay, that is the first statement that has been mentioned here. In the next statement he says, various non-experimental methods include survey and questionnaire research. That means survey is a non-experimental method. So if I go back to the question, which is a quasi-experimental method, I can say all these three are quasi-experimental methods except survey, which is a non-experimental method. Next question, which of the following is a limitation of the case study? Now case study, it's difficult to generalize from one case study would be the correct answer here, because I have gone through a village and I did a case study. Based on that case study, I cannot say all the villages of India would be similar to that villages or will have the similar problems. So it is difficult to generalize from the case study is a major limitation. The next question, experimental methods as compared to other method is more to study the cause-effect relationship. That's correct. Experimental methods study cause and effect relationship, so I can say assertion is correct. Next says, as compared to other method, experimental method permits more efficient control of extraneous variance. That is also correct, because when I am doing an experiment, I have the settings with me and I can control the external variance or the manipulation of the external variables. For example, there is a lot of disturbance because of noise in a test. I can isolate that room that's in my hand. So experimental method, you can definitely control the extraneous variables like noise or something else. So that's again correct. So I can say both the statements are correct, but control of extraneous variable does not prove that you are trying to do a cause-effect relationship. So both the statements are correct, but reason is not the correct explanation for assertion. Next, the emic and etic distinctions emphasize on the ethnographic research. The ethnographic research, the emic is within the society and etic is outside, the people outside. The next is, in the survey of students, each student was asked to state his views on educational system in not more than 60 words. This is an example of. So since you are asked to elaborate something and write, it is an example of open-ended questionnaire. In a closed-ended questionnaire, you would however be asked about a kind of yes, no, true, false or something like that. So the correct answer here would be open-ended question. With this, we covered the complete set of paper 2 for psychology examination for CBSE NET. We would be covering the next set in the further classes for paper 3. Till then, have a good day.